Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with another section of our Benny's Bats for today, Tuesday, August 25th. The idea of the Benny's Bats section here is what we try to do is look at every pitcher that's on the mound, figure out what their weakness is, and then figure out which bats profile to do the best against them. We got a full slate of 30 teams playing, 15 games tonight, so we're going to get right into it. First guy I want to talk about is Brad Hand from Miami. He's a left-handed pitcher who's allowed right-handed bats to hit 293 against him with a 1.43 whip. The problem with Hand is he doesn't give up a lot of home runs, and he's playing in a ballpark that also doesn't yield a lot of home runs. So I wouldn't look for a lot of big hits out of this Pittsburgh team today. They do have a lot of guys that profile well against left-handed pitching, though. Francisco Cervelli actually has amazing numbers this year against left-handers for a cheap catching option on the night. 419 WOBA, 206 ISO number, so he's definitely somebody you should look at. Outfielders Andrew McCutchen and Sterling Marte also have pretty good numbers with WOBAs in the 390s. Marte has a little bit of a higher ISO number, but Kutch's number has been creeping up as well. So I think both of these guys you can look at. You also want to look at shortstop Young Ho Kang. Again, he's a guy that's been heating up lately. He's got a couple home runs over his last games. He had a 2-home-run game the other day, averaging double-digit DraftKings points in his last 6. So he's somebody else that you might want to consider. He hits left-handed pitching very well, even dating back to last season when he was in the Korean League. Next guy we want to talk about, another guy that we want to target against today, Jerome Williams. Williams has allowed lefties to hit 315, righties to hit 336. He has a whip of 1.65 to both sides of the plate. So he's really been struggling to get everybody out. And you could really look at guys, whether it's right-handers or left-handers on that Mets team. This Mets offense over the course of the last week has been absolutely on fire. Granted, they have played in good hitters' parks like Colorado and Philadelphia, but it doesn't really matter for us for daily fantasy. As long as they're putting up numbers and scoring runs, these are guys that we want to look at to put in our rosters. Curtis Granderson stands out to me as probably the top option I want to get. 391 WOBA with the 238 ISO number. Should be hitting on top of the order. As a road team, he's going to be getting that extra at-bat. And he's been a guy who's been putting up some big numbers lately. So I definitely want to try to get some Granderson into my rosters. Mostly, he's more of a tournament play for me. He is kind of volatile, very strikeout or home run prone. But lately, he's also been getting on base, been getting some hits, and scoring some runs. And like I said, against a guy like Williams, who's a little bit of a gas can, definitely wouldn't mind rolling him out there. You can look at guys like Yoenis Cespedes. Again, righty-righty matchups. He's been absolutely killing the ball in righty-righty matchups this year. Since coming over to the Mets, he owns a 389 WOBA, 230 ISO score, so he's another guy you got to consider. Even when he was on the Tigers earlier in the year, he's struggled a little bit against left-handed pitching, but against righties, he's been mashing all season long. Guys like Michael Conforto, another left-handed bat I think you can look at. You could also look at some of the guys that they had come back off of the DL. A guy like David Wright, who hit a home run in his first game, first at bat off the DL yesterday. You got guys like Travis d'Arnaud, who came back a couple weeks ago. Even a guy like Juan Lagares, if he's in there. These guys have all been putting up pretty good numbers lately. So, again, I think this is a good game that you can look to stack. It's a good hitter's ballpark, a guy who struggles against lefties and righties. Basically, all the things you look for when you want to figure out which team you want to stack up tonight. Again, another game that you can stack. We got Mike Folty-Newitz pitching for Atlanta. He's going up against Colorado. Left-handed bats are hitting 337 against him. Right-handed bats hitting 299 against him. He's given up about 8 home runs to he's got 8 home runs to right-handed bats, 9 home runs to left-handed bats, and a whip of about 1.80 to both sides of the plate. Now, Cargo left the game early yesterday for Colorado, so I don't know if he's going to be in the lineup today. I would think that at the very least he's going to get today off, which means that, there's going to be a little bit of a weaker lineup, but there's also going to be a couple guys that are a little bit cheap that are going to be hitting in better spots. Ben Paulson is one of those guys that stands out to me. I wouldn't doubt if he's the cleanup hitter today for this Colorado team. He has about a 360 WOBA so far this year against right-handed pitching. And again, Folty-Newitz is nothing that you want to be scared of, so I definitely think you want to try to target some bats against them. Charlie Blackmon homered yesterday. He has a 375 WOBA, 185 ISO against right-handed pitching, so he's another guy that's in play. And Nolan Arenado, even though it's a righty-on-righty split, he's been absolutely phenomenal in righty-on-righty splits this year. He's got over 20 home runs against right-handed pitching, 385 WOBA, 313 ISO number. So those are some really big scores. My problem with Arenado is he's very expensive today, so he's not going to be a guy that's easy to fit in your rosters. But again, I think that makes him a good tournament play because I don't think a lot of people are going to pay up for him. Let's see. We have Irving Santana pitching today, going up against that Tampa Bay team. Left-handed bats hitting 279 against him, 6 homers in 28 innings. The only guy that really stands out is John Jaso if you're looking for a cheap catching option. Jaso's got a 354 WOBA, 163 ISO. He's been batting on top of that order against left-handed pitching. Against right-handed pitching as a left-handed batter. So I think he's going to be somebody that you can definitely look at as well. Let's see. We got Danny Duffy going up in the next game. Duffy for Kansas City at home. He's been pretty solid this year. Left-handed bats are actually hitting 277 against them. Right-handed bats have hit him for a little bit more power. 268 average there, but 10 home runs in 80 innings pitched. And he has a 1.41 whip against lefties. So lefties against righties. So righties are getting on base against him. Because he's been a little bit tougher on lefties and doesn't give up a lot of home runs, and he's in Kauffman Stadium, even though a guy like Chris Davis has pretty good numbers, I don't think this is a spot I really want to try to roll him out at a high price. The one guy who I do like is Adam Jones. Jones has raised his WOBA over 402. His ISO scores up to 266. So he was a guy who struggled earlier in the year, but right now he's seeing the ball and hitting it well. He's been a pretty boomer bust option lately. I think he has 3 DraftKings scores of 25 or above in his last 9 games, but he also has a couple zeros and a couple 3-point games mixed in there as well. So I don't like him as much for cash, but I think as a tournament upside play, you can use him. I don't think a lot of people are going to be using him against Kansas City at Kansas City. Although if you look at Kansas City, it's actually been a stadium. Kauffman's been a place that yielded a good amount of runs and a decent amount of hits this year as well. So I definitely think he's in play, even though the home run upside is probably not there. I think you can still roll him out for a tournament as he's been pretty good lately and had some really, really big games. Next guy we can talk about, Matt Cain. Matt Cain's another guy I would like to target against today. Lefties are hitting 341 against them. Righties are hitting 275. Anytime you have a right-handed pitcher on the mound, Kyle Schwarber is going to be one of the top options at catcher. He's got a 455 WOBA since his call-up with a 344 ISO number. We all know what kind of power this guy has. We all know what kind of consistency he has. Again, if he's cheap on whatever site you're playing on, I definitely think he's an option that you want to consider today. I also really like Anthony Rizzo. Rizzo with a 394 WOBA, 270 ISO number. He started to pick it up lately. I think he has about 9 DraftKings points in 5 or 6 straight games. So he's somebody else I think you can use both in cash and tournaments today. The last guy on that Cubs team I want to mention is Chris Bryant. Chris Bryant, even though it's a righty-on-righty matchup, he's hitting 360. He has a 366 WOBA with a 213 ISO number in righty-on-righty matchups. Hit a couple home runs the other day. I mean, you know, he goes under the radar whenever it's a righty-on-righty matchup, but this guy has such great power that if he makes contact, he always has a chance to hit one out. I haven't had a chance to look at the wind situation yet. I think they are at home in Wrigley Field today. So if the wind is blowing out or if it's blowing out to left field, you know, you definitely got to think about putting Brian in your lineup. Let's see. We got John Lamb, who's one of the big gas cans that's on the mound today. He's a rookie pitcher who they were expecting a little more out of, but so far he's basically been bad to everybody. He takes on a Dodgers team, though, that hasn't really been hitting all that well lately. There are a couple guys that I think you can consider against a left-handed pitcher like Lamb. Guys like Kiki Hernandez and Scott Van Slyke are always in the lineup. They have pretty good numbers. They both hit left-handed pitching pretty well. So I think that they're 2 options you can consider. The guy I like the best, though, is Yasiel Puig. Puig has a 377 WOBA with a 275 ISO against left-handed pitching this year. So he's definitely one of those guys that I would like to roll out into my lineup. And the thing I like about him is he's pretty cheap on almost every site. This is a guy who was a top 10, top 20 kind of priced player early in the season and towards the end of last year. And right now you're getting him down as like a mid to lower tier option. So if you can get a guy like that into your lineup, I definitely think there's going to be a lot of upside with him today. He was really cheap on FanDuel the other day. I know I threw him in the lineup and he had a pretty good game. He's really cheap today on DraftKings. I saw that this morning. He's only like $3,500, which again, for a guy that has Puig's upside, that's just, it's not enough money. So I think you can get a good value on him and roll him out there in your cash and tournament lineups. Let's see. We got Mike Montgomery pitching for Seattle. Montgomery's actually been really, really good this year. And Oakland, there's really no left-handed bats. Montgomery struggled in lefty-on-lefty matchups, and there's nobody on Oakland who really hits well in lefty-on-lefty situations. So I don't really have anybody down here to target. I don't think that Montgomery's going to go out there and throw a gem and get your 40 fantasy points on DraftKings or 20 points on a site like Aces, 15 points on Fantasy Feud, anything like that. But I also don't see Oakland really lighting them up as an offense that's been struggling a little bit lately. Although they have come alive these last couple days. They put up a couple runs yesterday and a couple runs the day before. We got Willie Peralta, another guy I think we can look to go after. Left-handed bats hitting 290 against him with 8 homers and 42 innings pitched. A guy like Jason Kipnis makes a lot of sense. 410 WOBA for Kipnis. He's been hitting right-handed pitching really well all season and basically has hit right-handed pitching well his entire career. So I definitely think he's somebody that's in play. You could also look at Michael Brantley, 378 WOBA, 163 ISO if he's in there today. I think those are the 2 guys who I would really look to use. If you want to try to throw some of the cheaper options in there, guys like Lindor or Jose Ramirez, if they're up towards the top of the order, if you need a salary saver, I don't think they're the worst options either. Not a huge fan of Peralta, although, I would rather stick with some of the bigger bats if I'm going to use anybody against them. Let's see. Next guy we can talk about, Miguel Gonzalez. Gonzalez has been okay, and he's pitching in a pretty decent park over in Kansas City. 270 batting average to left-handers, 262 to right-handers. So really there hasn't been anybody who's dominated him, but he also hasn't really been dominant against either-handedness. He has given up about 20 home runs this year and a little over 110 innings pitched. So I do think that you can look at some of those home run hitters. But again, the game is in Kaufman, which is not an easy place to hit one out of. Eric Hosmer makes a little bit of sense to me. 405 WOBA, 204 ISO score. And Ben Zobrist has been really hot. It's not the handedness that you usually like to see Zobrist against, but 376 ISO, 376 WOBA, 176 ISO 167 ISO since coming over in the trade. So I think he's another guy that we can look at here today. Next guy I want to talk about, Josh Tomlin against Milwaukee. I mean, this guy's been lights out so far in his first 2 starts. If you're going to use anybody against them, dating back, the numbers that seem to stick out are going to be guys that are left-handed. I don't really like excuse me, I don't really like Scooter Gannett in this spot, but I think I would be able to roll out an Adam Lind if you need a cheaper first base option. If Lind is priced up and expensive, I think it makes more sense to just pay up a couple $100 more, get a guy like Rizzo who's in a much better spot. But I don't hate Lind today and think he could be an option. Guys like Ryan Braun and Chris Davis are decent in righty-on-righty matchups as well. But again, like I said, Tomlin's been really, really good, so I'm not really targeting anybody against him. Maybe for a GPP lineup, I'd throw somebody in there, but that's probably about the extent of the bats on the Brewers I would use today. You got Charlie Morton in a pretty good matchup against the Miami Marlins today. Morton has allowed left-handed bats to hit 277 against him with a whip of 1.55. The one guy who stands out, the one lefty who I always love, is Derek Dietrich. 404 WOBA, 281 ISO number, and his price is always really cheap. I really like sites where he's still available at second base. When you have to roll him out there at third base, I feel like you're giving up a little bit too much because there are some big third base options on a daily basis. But if you need a salary saver and you need a guy that can give you some upside, Dietrich has shown that he can do it in righty-lefty matchups. The problem I have here is it's not a good hitter's ballpark for him. But again, that's only something that keeps his price low and his ownership low. So he could be a really good tournament option. Next guy we can talk about, Jose Quintana. Right-handed bats have been the way to go after Quintana. They got a 294 batting average with a 1.37 whip. Lefties have been horrendous against them, so I wouldn't look to roll out any of the lefties. Guys like Xander Bogaerts, Rusney Castillo, Jackie Bradley Jr., those guys are all guys who might have a chance today, might be in play. Even a guy like Mookie Betts, who just came back from the DL and is hitting on top of the order. These are some of the bats that you can look at, but again, it's not a game that I'm looking to target heavily. Jesse Chavez pitching for Oakland. Chavez has been really good. Left-handed bats have been the way to get after him. 274 batting average with 11 home runs in 73 innings. Nelson Cruz has been good against everybody this year. 399 WOBA, 268 ISO, and righty-on-righty matchups. So I think you got to look at him. And Robinson Cano, basically over the course of the last month, Cano has become the player that we expected him and that Seattle fans and Seattle management expected him to be when they gave him a contract for $250 million. So I think Cano is another guy you can look at here. His numbers don't jump off the page yet, but again, this guy's done it for so many years that we know what he has, we know what he can offer. And the fact that he's starting to hit better lately only means that, you're getting on the train early before everybody else jumps on the Cano bandwagon. His price is still very cheap on a lot of sites, so I definitely think that he's another guy you can look at here. Let's see. We got Nathan Karns going up for Tampa Bay. Left-handed bats are hitting 246 against him with 5 home runs and 71 innings pitched. He's been a little bit tougher to righties this year, and he's actually been pretty solid. The one guy who stands out, and somebody who I already put in my fantasy feud roster this morning because I think his price is really square over there, is Miguel Sano. 457 WOBA, 358 ISO number. I keep hearing people tell me that, well, you know, what he's done in righty-on-righty matchups, it's not sustainable. And frankly, I don't really care. Whether or not they think it's sustainable or not, he's been doing it. And every time you see this guy against a righty, he's been taking those right-handed pitchers' yard. So you know what? If I can get that kind of upside out of a guy who's at a pretty square price, I'm going to put him in my lineup. Have him in my lineup already here today for the Fantasy Feud qualifier. They still have 7 seats left for that qualifier. And today is one of the price-friendliest options that they have. It's only a $33 buy-in. So if you want to throw a lineup in there, try to take your chance at qualifying to play for $500,000. I don't think you're going to get a better option than the one that you have today in that situation. Let's see. We also have a guy like Alfredo Simon, left-handed bats hitting 296 against him, 12 home runs in 78 innings pitched. There's really no left-handed bats, though, on the Angels. And even the right-handed bats that stand out, guys like Trout and Pujols, haven't been all that hot lately. So while I think Simone is somebody, or Simon, I don't know how you say it, is somebody that could get lit up today, I don't have any certainty on who could do it. If you wanted to stack up some Angels bats for a tournament, I don't think it's a bad idea because, Simon has been getting lit up. But I don't see anybody who's jumping out. I mean, maybe Cole Calhoun is a left-handed bat. I don't know. I think they picked up a couple other guys like Victorino, Matt Joyce. But, I mean, again, none of those guys are people who are jumping off the page at me that I'm really, antsy to get into my rosters. Let's see. We got Chad Bettis pitching for Colorado against Atlanta today. Again, I don't really see anybody on Atlanta that I really want to target against either. I don't think Bettis is a great pitcher. I think that, they can get to him. I think Atlanta can score some runs against them, but nobody really stands out to me as, oh, this is the guy you have to play. There's a couple cheap bats on that team you want in your lineup. By all means, go ahead and put them in there. But like I said, right now, I just don't see exactly which guys that's going to be for me. We got Mark Burley going up against Texas. This is a tough matchup for Texas. Burley, lefty on lefty, is actually pretty tough, and Texas is horrendous this year against left-handed pitching. Adrian Beltre had a big game the last time they faced a lefty, so he could definitely be somebody that you could look at. Might be somebody that's in play. Maybe even a Delino DeShields as a left-hander on top of that order. It is a 261 batting average that Burley has allowed left-handed bats to have against him this year. So if you want to look at guys like Fielder and all them, I think there's a little bit of merit to it. The game's in Texas. It's a good hitter's ballpark, but again, it's just not something that is jumping off the page at me, but I wouldn't argue against anybody who told me they were going that way today. Let's see. We have Weaver pitching for the Angels against Detroit. Left-handed bats hitting 277 against him with 10 home runs. There's really no left-handed bats on Detroit to target, but there are some guys that are really good righty on righty. A guy like Miguel Cabrera, 445 WOBA, 232 ISO number. Guy like JD Martinez, 384 WOBA, 269 ISO number. Both of these guys have been mashing right-handed pitching all year. So I think both of these guys could be guys that are in play. I wouldn't argue against using either one of them. Again, the upside that they have, and, it's not like Weaver is a dominant guy who's going to go out there and blow fastballs by you. He throws about 85 miles an hour, maybe even 90 at a top at this point in his career. So again, he's not somebody who scares me. I don't mind using any of the Detroit bats. I think that a bunch of them could have a big game today. Next guy we can talk about, Ivan Nova against Houston today. Left-handed bats are hitting 286 against him. So a guy like Preston Tucker is back in play. Tucker is very cheap, 360 WOBA, 251 ISO number. So he's cheap and he has some upside, which is exactly what we look for in a guy who we want as a salary saver. Depending on what site you're playing on, he might be a better value than he is on some other places. If you can find this guy cheap, relatively cheap, I think he's a decent option to roll out there. You also have a guy like Carlos Correa. Correa in righty-on-righty matchups has been pretty good. He also has about a 360 WOBA. And again, even though Nova is better against right-handers than he is against left-handers, Correa is quickly becoming the top fantasy option at the shortstop position and definitely somebody who you have to respect and consider. That pretty much sums it up for most of the guys who I think we should be targeting heavily There are a couple pitchers with a couple guys that stand out. James Shields has been a high strikeout guy this season, but left-handed bats have also hit 280 against him with 17 homers in 73 innings. So Bryce Harper with his 475 WOBA and his 345 ISO number stand out as somebody who you can look at. It's not the greatest hitter's park for him here, but again, Shields has struggled big time with lefties and given up home runs, and Harper is a lefty who can hit a lot of home runs. So it makes a lot of sense that the two of them together would probably equal a pretty good game for Harper. Jamie Garcia, another guy I'm not looking to target against. He's been good this season. He's actually a little bit more of a reverse splits guy, lefty on lefty. So against this Arizona team that has a lot of big bats in it, you're looking at guys like maybe a Peralta, maybe an Inciarte on top and lefty on lefty. They have some big right-handed bats that have big numbers, but Garcia has a 188 batting average against right-handed bats. So if you want to roll out guys like Goldie, if you want to roll out guys like Castillo, my problem is, or even Pollock, my problem is I think that these guys are going to be higher owned because people are just going to look at the left-hander being on the mound and say, oh, Arizona's offense has been good. They're going up against a lefty. Let me get all these right-handed bats in. But again, with as tough as Garcia's been on right-handed hitting, I don't think it's a slam dunk. So I'm not looking to target a lot in this game very heavily either. Let's see. We got Strasburg going up against San Diego. I mean, whether or not you were on the Strasburg train last time, the guy seems to be back to his old self. So if he's back to his old self, I don't think you can target bats against him. If you want to do something with some upside for a tournament, I think it would be a good place to target because I think coming off the last couple good starts that he had, his ownership's going to be really high. But again, I think it deserves to be really high today. I think he's in a pretty good spot. The San Diego team is not, a team that mashes right-handed pitching. Justin Upton's about the only one who stands out based on the numbers. And I think Strasburg could put up another good game today. But for a tournament, if you wanted to do something different, something that's going to be contrarian, again, if you play bats against a guy who's going to be highly owned and he has a bad game like Jacob deGrom did last night, if you played Phillies last night against deGrom, not only were you one of the few people with a Philly stack, but you also get the double bonus when deGrom gets blown up because all those people who had deGrom are going to get knocked down too. And if you did have a Philly stack last night, there's a very good chance that you took home some decent money and had a shot at some big money if that was the way you went. So for a tournament, I could see it, but for cash games, I'm not taking anybody on this San Diego team. Same thing goes with Noah Syndergaard. I mean, normally I would think Syndergaard is a automatic start, and I'm not taking any bats against them. But I mean, how good is this Phillies offense be? They absolutely demolished Jacob deGrom last night, and deGrom has probably been one of the top 5 pitchers in the National League for the entire season, and that was easily his worst start. I mean, he hadn't given up that many runs in his last 3 or 4 starts, so he got lit up for like 7 runs in 3 innings yesterday. Definitely don't know if I want to mess too much with this Philly offense right now. They have a lot of cheap options in there, guys like Andres Blanco and Cesar Hernandez up top. Even a guy like Ryan Howard, who we talked about yesterday, who had a big game and made us look pretty good over here. Those are just some guys that are just hitting it really, really well right now. So I don't think I want to target too many guys against Syndergaard, even though based on the numbers, it seems like this would be a good spot for him. But remember, it seemed to be a great spot for deGrom yesterday, and that didn't turn out really well. So I think the Philly offense deserves a lot more of our respect than they're getting in the DFS community. Let's see. We got Dallas Keuchel going up against the Yankees. Anytime you have a lefty on the mound against the Yankees, you got to look at guys like Chris Young and Alex Rodriguez. But Keuchel's been really, really good. Keeps the ball on the ground, so I don't see a lot of big home run potential. I don't know if I really want to target a lot of bats against them. Like I said, if I'm doing anything, I'm looking at those righties, guys like Young, guys like A-Rod, but they're not great starts. They're just guys to consider and maybe throw into a tournament roster. Next guy up is Jake Arrieta. I don't like Arrieta at all on the mound today, but I also don't know if I want to target a ton of bats against them. San Francisco is very good in righty-on-righty matchups. They have a lot of guys that hit well against right-handed pitching, but they do have a worse batting average at home this year. San Francisco at San Francisco is not as good as San Francisco on the road. I like targeting them much more when they're on the road. At home, they're a little bit of a lesser of a hitting offensive team. Arrieta has been good too. So this is one of those games where I'm not really looking to target anybody, but I'm not looking to target against Arrieta either. I'm not taking any bats. I'm not taking Arrieta. I'm basically just staying away from this game altogether. I think that's probably the best way to play it, although I think Arrieta could have some upside in the tournament, depending on his price and depending on what site you're playing on. So that basically completes our rundown of all the bats for today. Thank you for joining us for another section of Benny's Bats here at rotocurve.com. Be sure to follow us on Twitter over at RotoCurve. You can follow me on Twitter at BennyR11. And if you haven't signed up yet, make sure you get over to the RotoCurve community and sign up for an account. For every post that you put in the forum and all the activity that you guys do, you'll start earning curve points that you can trade in for tickets to games, money that you can play with on the sites, even some RotoCurve swag like hats and shirts that we have in our store. So make sure you guys get over there and sign up. We got a lot of NFL stuff that's going to be coming out. I know there's a lot of people who are switching off from baseball mode to NFL. Josh does a great job with the preseason picks that he's been putting up. And we're going to start, well, we actually already started, but we have a lot more content that's going to be coming online in the next week or two for NFL football stuff. So make sure you sign up over there. This way you stay in the loop on it all. And as always, stay classy, DFS.